Hi, my name is Maeve Cerny, and as my part of the Life Design Lab at Morristown High School this year, I chose to make a project about learning how to crochet and how to use that to benefit others. So this year I set a goal to learn how to and master crocheting. The first portion of the project was the learning and mastering aspect. However, the second portion was to apply that skill and create baby blankets to be donated to the local hospital's ICU. So why did I choose crocheting? A couple of years back, I had acquired the skill, but I was unable to continue doing this due to time constraints. I learned that had a really calming effect on me, and it's a pretty versatile skill to be able to create unlimited product. It can be used to benefit both myself and others by gifting, and as instead of buying things, I can then make it myself. So a couple things that I had done before. I did this at about sixth grade. I learned how to crochet self-taught using YouTube. I had made a book of some of the things. So here was my instructions on how to make a shoulder bag. And then here's my sample shoulder bag that I had made. Another thing is I learned how to make solid granny squares and flower daisy granny squares. So I used those to make this bag, which I never actually got to finish, which is a prime example of how I was running out of time as school picked up, athletics, all of those things. So here we have the daisy granny squares, the plain ones, and then I have a border of single crochets here. And then I did create single crochet straps to be attached onto here, but because of time constraints, I was never able to actually attach them and finish this project. So throughout this class, we learned that it's not like a basic class in academics like you would have in high school. However, you look at purpose in a different light. So the definition we learned is that purpose is a life compass that motivates and guides you to powerfully contribute to others in the world while simultaneously providing you with a lasting sense of personal meaning. It's a combination of understanding values, being motivated beyond the self, and acting in pursuit of your goals. So I applied this application through each of those three sectors. The first one being understanding those values and beliefs. I began the year with very concrete goals, and those goals included values that I had to possess in order to reach those goals. So things that I knew that I must have down were my reflectiveness, my accountability, my self-reliance, adaptability, and patience. So then an acting pursuit of my goals. So these concrete goals of mastery and outreach, I actively work towards every day, whether that be in school or out. So I would try new stitches, evaluate efficiency, work towards my final product, which I will get to, and communicate with social workers from the hospital if necessary at the time frame. So some things I created was a single crochet, which I learned how to do again, half double crochet, and a double crochet. And then I relearned how to do a granny square. Obviously, since these were my first time around, they don't look the best and have the best results. However, as my first samples, it was just more of trying to evaluate what would be the quickest, most efficient, what would use the least amount of material, etc. So then in the third portion, being motivated beyond the self, I was motivated to comfort others, as in the babies, which I will get to, as well as give them something unique to themselves. I know that when babies come out of a hospital, they're given very generic blankets. And then another one of those is the calming effects of crocheting would also enable me to be a kinder, calmer person at times, whether that be just to myself or to others. And then this new skill would also enable me to make gifts or other goods for loved ones as opposed to buying the generic. So in the accomplishments, I showed you guys all of the samples that I made, and then here is my final product, which I will explain how I got here and what each different color means. So it's a 30 by 30 baby blanket, which will be getting donated soon after this is completed. So the different colors, meaning I started with the blue, so this is one skein of yarn. Then I did the yellow and the blue and the pink. I used leftover yarn so I wouldn't have to buy new ones, so that way I would also be financially able to complete this project very easily as well as help others. So I created that final one, and along this process, each new yarn leaves ends out, so I would use my crochet hook and a darning needle. So this is what I used to create it, and then a darning needle to weave in each of the ends. So some hardships I faced were there were uneven patches or holes, uneven tension, jagged sides, and then also just the time constraints in and of themselves. So the different colors, you can see I would have figured that I would have been able to finish this project not as long as it took, and be able to create a lot of them to donate. However, as you can see, it's a lot looser up at the top, and the sides are a bit uneven. They're not as straight as I would have liked them to be. You can even see within here, there's some holes. However, once you get farther down into the next colors, you see that the edges begin to get a little bit straighter, and there's less of those tension holes showing my learning throughout the process. So what did I learn? So my first lesson includes practice, consistency, and engagement. By being consistently engaged, I was driving my project by practicing every day to work towards my goals. As I progressed throughout the year, the blanket I had been making had visually begun to improve, as I just discussed. Hardships I encountered included those random tension holes and jagged edges. However, the more consistent I was with working on the blanket, even when we didn't have class, for example, over Thanksgiving, I was talking to my family members and I was just working at the same time, as it doesn't require much thought and it's just something relaxing to do and complete as I am interacting with my family. Even when we didn't have class, I saw more of these imperfections begin to disappear, as I did with those different colors. This lesson can apply to everyday life and countless other skills. The more you work towards a goal consistently, even when no one is watching, the better and quicker your outcome will be. So the second lesson I learned was in the time constraints and my adaptability. Although I was consistently engaged, I faced one of my most substantial hardships, being that of time constraints. My original goal was to make several blankets, yet I was only able to make the one. I did not expect crocheting one baby blanket to take so long, yet this hardship allowed me to adapt my project to better fit my goals. I honed in on the process and mastering the skill instead of what my final material would be. I am still able to use my final material for the good and donate it, although the small quantity of the outcome is not what I had originally expected. The situation reflects a real-world lesson, as things occur and change that may affect your plans, but you must find a way to adapt and work your way around them for an even better outcome. In my original plan, I was to make several of these blankets, donate them. I talked to social workers from the hospital. They were super excited, but I was really only ever able to make the one, which I still will donate, as that was the whole purpose. However, I do wish I was able to make more. However, I did still complete that first portion of the mastery, which I find to be very valuable. So my third lesson is that skill creation in and of itself and my initiative and communication with the outside world. So by the end of this project, I was able to successfully develop and gain a new skill, not only being that of simply crocheting, but taking my own initiative to communicate and work productively. I was consistent with taking initiative and responsibility for my work, whilst communicating outside of it. Along with internal class communications with my classmates, I was able to strengthen my personal communication skills throughout my phone calls with the ICU. I learned quick turnaround responses and skills to update them along my process. Although my outcome could be viewed negatively, I was able to communicate positively in a way that still helps others as well as my personal growth. Thank you for listening.